All right, it's now 7 o'clock, so we'll get started. I know people are going to continue to come in. My name is Dent Wilkins. I'm with US Squash, and I'd like to welcome all of you to tonight's Junior Squash Forum. Really appreciate everyone taking an hour out of their night and joining us. We're going to be running from 7 to 8 p.m. Tonight, but then we'll be able to have a continued question and answer session after the fact at 8 o'clock if people would like to stay on and continue to ask questions. Questions will be able to be directed directly to me via the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom window. You can chat them directly to Dent Wilkins, and I'll collate them and bring them to our panelists. And speaking of those panelists, we're happy to have Kevin Klipstein, the US Squash President and CEO, Kim Klirkin, our Vice President of Programs and Events, and then Sue Venkatesan, our Board Chair, join us tonight. So before we get into the formal agenda, I'd like to pass it over to Sue, who's going to welcome everyone and give us some kickoff comments. Sue.
Hi, everyone. As Dent said, and thank you, Dent, Sue Venkatesan. I am the board chair of US Squash over the last just over a year. I scrolled quickly through to see the participants here, and actually very happy to see a lot of new names. So I'd like to make a quick introduction. For those that don't know me, I do have a junior son. Both my boys did play in the system. I have one that's currently in the system. He's a BU 17. Most of his time in BU 17 has been spent during the year and a half of the pandemic conditions that we have had. And I did want to share that, like all of you, we've experienced the highs and lows of the sport, and the conversations in our house have been quite interesting and heated. My son is a consumer of the system and lets me know very clearly what he thinks about it when he's unhappy. So in any event, I am here. I was not originally on the agenda today for a very specific reason. And I did want to share with this group that junior squash policy is very much something within the managerial control. The board has governance functions, not management functions over the oversight of the actual program. And junior squash is, while very significant and important to US Squash and the overall sports health, where it's all interconnected, and it might surprise many on here that it is actually a small fraction of the revenue base of US Squash, and there are many complexities to national sports governing bodies that are handled across the management team. The demands are increasing in terms of compliance, et cetera. So there is a very specific reason why management is focused on the junior squash policies. We are a small sport. There, with governing bodies for smaller sports, there have been aspects of the development of the sport in which you may have creep or maybe not clear lines of government and managerial control. And I'm very happy to say that 15 years ago, much of that was sort of improved, and we've seen very good results from having experienced staff with integrity focused on the policies. It does not mean that we don't have room to improve throughout, and certainly in today's context with rapidly changing conditions, it's we've got to be very adaptive in its new terrain, and so input comes from a lot of different places. I do want to share, and I'm sorry for the speed of my comments, but I would like to get on to what I know you really came here to listen to. I did want to say that the process is collaborative and consultative in many respects that may not be seen to all of you. We need to do a better job of sharing some of that, but we do have 28 committees that provide some advisory role, as well as board governance roles and advisory panels that help inform management on different topics, of which junior squash is a very significant one. And these town halls and regional town halls, et cetera, as well as other factors are very important. I'm here actually to make opening remarks, but mostly it is to listen. This is a very dynamic time. I understand that the changes that have been put out has had significant impact on families after a very difficult stretch. And all that we can do to listen. And while we know no policy is going to be able to satisfy everyone's concern, our work here is to listen and try to see if directionally we can get closer to a better answer. There is not a perfect answer that can be achieved in the current context. And for that, I do want to let you know that this is a tough outlook for many people navigating through this. US Squash has been focused on prioritizing the health of the community, but also what every other public and private company and nonprofit is doing, which is to also balance out and thread the needle on supporting the ecosystem of the sport, the health of and enjoyment, but always prioritizing families and players' health and safety. So with that, I do want to turn this over to Kevin. And in my introduction to Kevin, I've known Kevin for some time through, like in squash, we are all connected in some way through mutual friends. The one thing that I will say in joining the board and spending time with him is I have incredible respect for his integrity, and that comes through across the team at US Squash. It is one of the most important functions of the board to ensure the ethical integrity of the organization, especially sports governing bodies. It is probably the biggest risk factor outside of financial resources, ensuring the financial resources. So with that, I would like it to turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you for being on and for joining and your comments. I want to thank everyone who's joined this junior forum so far, and I expect we'll continue to host these on a regular basis as we head into the more traditional season. I actually was just on earlier this evening, a similar call as a participant of my son's school. And the call was intended to be a review of the curriculum and all the exciting new things coming up and opportunities for the students. And the agenda essentially shifted towards safety. And that was largely what was discussed, with the idea of other items we can get to over time. However, safety needs to come first. And I think so we're not alone in this junior forum, where originally we wanted to cover return to play and the pathways that we've been working on over the last year, review the changes to the junior policies for the 2021-22 season, including an overview of the competitive structure and a variety of policies. And that's really in Kim Clerkin's wheelhouse, and we'll give her a chance to address those. Kim has also done a wonderful job of really ultimately, guiding the day-to-day approach to supporting facilities and coming back to squash and supporting all the participants over the last 18 months. So a thanks to her particularly. So I'll cover this upfront part, and then we'll begin to take your questions. When we were working on the rollout of the new policies, which in the past has been a bigger deal, there were more moving parts around point structures and tournament structures and numbers of events, et cetera. There actually aren't a whole lot going into the 21-22 season, and mostly it's nice opportunities. So no major shifts, and those were announced a few weeks ago. But as we were working on these and working on the rollout of these and making sure our systems support them, the Delta variant happened, and we find ourselves navigating this really familiar, however, also challenging shifting landscape related to COVID. And as a result, we'll spend a healthy amount of time on this call addressing it. and our recently announced COVID protocols and addressing people's questions and concerns. So depending on how much that time that takes, as Dent mentioned, we'll shift to the policies, take questions. We'll wrap the call at 8 o'clock as scheduled. However, we're more than willing to stay on. We've committed to at least an extra half an hour if we need it to answer questions if we don't get to all of them on the initial run. And as I mentioned, we'll look to schedule additional forums. So taking a look back, just trying to put sort of where we are in perspective, despite our planning cycles and our return to play plans, which in June we felt were right on track. I mean, I was in Chicago for a night at the World Championships there, an amazing job. People from around the world were hugging each other and high-fiving, and so happy to see one another. And then I went off to San Diego to the opening of the Access Youth Academy community program there. And there was just real spirit of, we're so happy to be getting back to normal, and how much has changed in just the 6 weeks. And as a reminder, we've been at this return to play since spring 2020. We were the first governing body to shut down all competitions. We've been among the most proactive on working with facilities to make sure the sport is getting back to providing people a chance to play, but doing it safely. And we've continued to maintain and update our protocols on capacity and other safety measures, ventilation. Last fall, the district and regional level play started, and we put in this interim junior framework. Imperfect, however, something to give kids something to aspire towards. And we made the conscious decision to host essentially a summer season, given the demand that was out there. And I think it's important for people to remember that there has been, and it still is, an extremely high social and emotional toll the pandemic has had on kids and was having on kids, and their lack of outlets to interact with each other and pursue their goals and not being in front of screens. So the desire to kind of get back to normal as quickly as possible, was there. And pediatricians have been seeing increases in obesity, huge mental health crisis with kids. And so providing this healthy, safe outlet is important, and getting back to normal. We see that as our role to provide the structure for that opportunity, setting the bar to help people move towards that if they're comfortable. And so it also helps us at this time to move into a fulsome season, 21-22, which is what we are planning. And part of this summer is the reason we have so many tournaments on the schedule is we want to make it easy for people. We want to reduce travel needs and reduce event sizes for safety. We want to give people as much choice as possible. So we don't want people to misinterpret the idea of us creating opportunities as driving towards objectives other than just safe opportunities to kind of get back to the sport that we love. And we totally understand that not everyone has been ready to come back. And we're also equally focused on other pathways to compete. That's something that a few of Kim's slides really addresses and has been a really great key learning coming out of this pandemic and working within it, which is to say, there are lots of ways in which kids can and should engage in the sport. And so we can talk to that as well. The transition phase this summer with regional and national competitions, is the lead into this full season, and that's where we are now. And so before bouncing into the future and talking about that and COVID policies and other policies, I do want to thank Sue, you. I want to thank the board, the members of several committees. As Sue mentioned, we have 28 committees. We are gearing up to much more actively engage them. We have many that are extremely active already. In this case, on these topics, we have a medical advisory panel, which has been very active. We have an expanding junior squash advisory panel to become more regionally representative, but is very engaged. We have a teaching pro advisory panel to engage the most active teaching pros, basically open to all to seek their input. We also have 35 districts, and we've never been more engaged with them, with their leadership. We've had monthly calls literally for the last year and a half, and I think they feel very well supported, and we're very aligned with them. So I want to thank all the people who are actually involved in supporting what is a small organization. I put out a message the other week, and I want to restate here now that our priority is the community safety. It always annoys me when airlines say safety is our #1 priority, but now I get it. It's not their mission, but it's their priority. And I think we're similar. Safety is not our mission, but our tagline's fit for life. Health and safety needs to be #1. Then we can focus on our mission-based work, providing access, fostering community, promoting sportsmanship, pursuing excellence. And to pursue our mission, we need to be safe. And speaking to medical professionals, preventing the spread of COVID all comes down to layering protections. And that effectively combats getting infected, the seriousness of the illness, and reducing the spread to others. None of this is news to any of you. We've all heard it, hundreds of times before. And the facts on this front have not changed in terms of the layered approach to protection. You can not leave home, which many of us didn't leave home for months on end. You can not engage, not compete. That's one. You can get vaccinated. You can wear a mask, and you can get tested, so that reducing the risk of spread. Good hygiene and distancing and ventilation and all of that are also helpful. But the fundamentals have not changed really for more than a year. And the details of our protocols that we announced are linked to on the website. We're not going to go through them in specificity now, but the adjustments essentially boil down to a few things. We're requiring proof of vaccination for players and spectators for all level of tournaments. Testing is required for pre-tournament participation in higher levels of tournaments that require more travel. Testing is required the first day of tournaments to play without a mask. And wearing masks is always recommended, period, regardless of vaccination status. And that's always been the case. And we just want to make sure that that's clear. And it's important for us to acknowledge that our community is generally vaccinated. It's a healthy community. And while the steps to mitigating spread haven't changed, the virus and its impact has recently and very quickly, which has required us to adapt quickly. Reported cases are up tenfold since just June. Average daily infections in the US is higher than it was last summer. So while not wanting to overreact, we see it as our role to be responsive to these changes as quickly as we can be and as responsibly. What's changed is there are cases, evidence and anecdotal of breakthrough infections, that the effectiveness of the vaccine may be declining as much as 50% against hospitalization. And importantly to this group, more kids are getting sick from COVID due to the Delta variant. So these are things that we know, and there are also unique aspects to squash that increase risk. It's inside, competitors share the same space. It's aerobic. People can travel extensively to compete. So we feel fortunate to have the infrastructure, even though we're a small sport, and perhaps because we're a small sport, to mitigate as much risk as possible to continue to keep the sport going at a national level. And I think we've been proactive appropriately in prioritizing safety while also doing what we can to provide people opportunities to return to the sport in the way they want and when they want. So I think it's important, kind of in conclusion, to say any significant outbreak connected to a squash competition would be catastrophic to us on a number of levels. The first is obviously the well-being of the people directly involved and the people that they engage with. The second is this would inevitably limit opportunities to play as a consequence, without doubt. And the resulting loss of opportunities to everybody involved, everybody on this call. So the whole ecosystem really would suffer, and it's an ecosystem effectively that supports itself. it's a micro economy. There's not a ton of outside money coming into squash. So if the general machinations of squash are not functioning, everybody suffers. And so, you know, we need to balance all of that. And by putting these protective layers in place, we're doing what we can to reduce the risk of the chances of any of this occurring. You know, I want to acknowledge that this hasn't been easy for anyone. We get it. We understand. Every day we question what we're doing, how we're doing it, whether we're doing the right thing, how we communicate with the community. As Sue mentioned, it doesn't always reveal the level of rigor, the level of discussion, the level of disagreement that's behind our decision-making and our guidance. But I can tell you it's there. The concern for the community is there. The concern to make it as satisfying and positive experience as possible is very much there. And so this is all work in progress. And you know, with that, again, I'd like to just sort of see if any questions have come in the meantime, and we can go from there.
Thanks, Kevin. I almost started talking off mute, or on mute, which would, you know, be the same as I'm sure all of your jobs day to day as you're sitting on these Zoom calls. So our first question, and Kim, I'm going to throw this to your way. We appreciate receiving this from Waleed. He indicated, Kim, it'd be helpful to have a little bit more color on what COVID tests are needed specifically with the JCT coming up, and whether the at-home kit that's linked in the guidance serve both a 3-day requirement, or is a lab needed for one or both of those tests?
Yes, I've had several people ask those questions, and it is in the policy page on the frequently asked questions section, but to go over that for you, the test that's required 3 days before, that can be a PCR test or it can be an antigen test as well, but that test needs to provide a digital result, because you then need to be able to send that result to us, and we'll give you more information on that next week as to how you can upload it. Some of the rapid tests don't give you that digital result. So make sure that if you're going to do one, I think we have 2 on the policy pages. One is a Binax Now COVID-19 AG card home test, and that's enabled by telehealth companies. So they then there's an app that you can use to get a certificate, which you can send to us. There's another one we have here called the Ellume COVID-19 home test, which is similar. But on the day of the tournament, we will supply the rapid test for you. So we have a supply from Binax Now as well as their self-test, and we will give that to you when you come to the tournament desk. So we'll give more instructions on that too next week, near the tournament start. Hope that helps. But if not, just email me and I can help you out more.
We had one question from Thomas Matthew, Kim, that's kind of a follow-on to that. I just wanted to make sure it's clear for everyone. So the on-day tournament testing at the JCTs, will that be conducted by US Squash, or what's the process for that?
Yeah, that's a self-test. So we have the self-test with us. So you'll come to the registration desk, who will give you the equipment you need with the instructions on how to do it, and then you'll be a self-test for the players, and then they need to show us their results.
Perfect, thank you. We have a question from Salvanarine for what happens to under 15 and above players who are in the process of being vaccinated, have tested negative, and wear masks. Can you talk about people who are in process of vaccination?
I can take that, Dent. The vaccine's shown to be fully effective for 2 weeks after the second shot. So until 2 weeks after the second shot, those players are not eligible to play. There's a degree of protection after one shot, but studies have shown that against the Delta variant, that one shot offers pretty low protection.
Great. And Kevin, I've got another question for you. We had a question, and I apologize, I don't have in chat the person who asked it, so I'll just ask it directly. Do we have a sense or numbers on how many cases have been linked to US Squash events, and whether anyone has been affected at an event up to this point? And the follow-on question from that was also whether the committee takes the VAERS data into consideration, which is the vaccine adverse event reporting system.
Right. So to the first, we're definitely aware of people being infected through playing squash, mostly early on in this pandemic. And we've had reports of competitors at accredited events with reporting testing positive as they've left. So we've been fortunate that we don't believe specifically there's been spread as a consequence of US squash events so far. And I think it's a credit to the community. It's not something that we want to take for granted, but we're obviously really pleased. In terms of the reporting data and adverse event reporting data, yes, absolutely. We're really fortunate to have some great advisors. They're as rigorous as you would want them to be. They're appropriately distant, at the same time, part of the squash community, and providing us really clear advice on that. So I don't believe there's anything that one would reasonably expect us to be tracking that we're not.
Kim, I've got one for you. Will JCT, I'm sorry, this is wrong. It's the wrong question. Sorry, is it true that for vaccinated players, masks will be required on court for gold, silver, and bronze tournaments?
Kim, can you confirm that?
Yeah, I can confirm that, yes. So for gold tournaments, there will be an option for the tournament directors to supply rapid tests, and because it's at their cost, so they will decide whether they can implement that on their site. And if they implement a rapid test, and the players can play without a mask, as long as the local guidelines allow them to do so. For the silver and bronze tournaments, even vaccinated players will need to wear masks, yes, I can confirm that.
And I'll just follow on to that again, to repeat the recommendation. We recommend everyone playing in accredited championships level or below wear masks when they're playing. Back to the question prior to that, in terms of do we know or how many cases have been linked to US squash events? Few to none, and we need to keep it that way. We need to do that together.
And I think I could add to that too, actually, that the ones that certainly I know about were as a result of not playing with a mask. So playing with a mask is safer.
So a follow on to an earlier question of why we are allowing under 11 and under 13 players who are not vaccinated, not able to be vaccinated at this point, to participate with masks, but not allowing mask wearing for those not vaccinated, regardless of age group, in the older age groups. Kevin, can I throw that one your way?
Sure. So U11 and 13 need to compete with masks, and the intent of that is obviously to make the protocols as layered and as safe as possible for national level competitions. Vaccinations allow national level players to compete without masks, which has been repeated as a priority and a desire for the older, higher level players, in particular, to play without masks. So we're able to do that while limiting risk through these various layers, including testing. Obviously, the U11 and U13s can't get vaccinated yet, so it can't be required.
Kevin, can you also elaborate on our thinking on putting an extra layer on top of current CDC requirements, which often recommend masks but don't require for vaccinated individuals in certain situations? Can you speak to why we have kind of an additional layer on top of that? It kind of plays back into the other safety elements you were speaking to earlier.
Sure. This involves kids. This involves aspects of the sport in that it's aerobic and people are in a tight space together. Anecdotally, we have, it's almost evidence, but it's anecdotal really, where we have a relationship with a facility that has been just superlative in their approach to masking and tracing. And they had an incident where someone who was known to be COVID, who found out they were COVID positive afterwards, had played with several people. Everyone was masked, well-ventilated facility. There wasn't actually any transmission. And so we know that for a fact. And so we know it's effective. And that's why we're doing it. We believe the trade-off is easily worth it. And, you know, we're also not alone. You know, again, these are kids, you know, I'm not sure there are a whole lot of schools in areas where squash is thriving, where kids aren't going to be wearing masks at schools.
I did want to read it really quickly. I see one or two people put their hands up. Any questions that people have, I would encourage people to send please directly to me in the chat. There's a chat button available right at the bottom of your screen, and I will continue to moderate and bring questions to the panel. So got a question, and Kevin and Kim, I'll let you decide who'd like to take it. On whether it's clear to all squash clubs that our recommendation is for masks to be worn by all players, regardless of age or vaccination status. They indicated that most clubs that they're involved with are no longer enforcing any kind of mask usage by anyone at this point.
Well, a lot has been changing. We've tried to be consistent on that, but you know, the last few weeks have made us even more focused on these layers. So we'll be sure to make that clear. I'm not sure, to be honest, why it wouldn't be clear. However, we'll definitely take that step.
I have a question regarding testing, and since this is the first time that we're doing direct testing at a JCT, question is basically, is there a cutoff point at which a division itself might be canceled? For instance, if there was a large amount of positive tests that came back specific to one division or another, and I know there's more thought that needs to go in this, but whether there are specific cutoff points for divisions or tournaments actually running if there are positive tests ahead of time. Kim, can I have you jump in on that? Easy one.
I mean, that's an interesting question. And that isn't something that I think that we've thought through because of the layered protection that we have. With 3 layers of protection, players will be vaccinated. Players will have done a PCR test that will have been negative 3 days beforehand. And then when you have the rapid test as well, we would believe that the majority of people would be testing negative at that point, and that we wouldn't be in a situation where we'd have so many people drop out because they're positive. But you know, it's a fair question, and perhaps that's something we should think about. I don't have a clear answer for you on that right now.
We believe it's a very unlikely scenario. Yeah.
We have a question about timelines, Kim, and kind of the announcement timeline leading into this JCT and people's ability to kind of make decisions and you know, both around vaccines or testing, travel, and so on. Can you speak to just the timeline of the decisions in our announcements as far as these policies?
I'll take that. We understand this is late-breaking development. The Delta variant and its impact has also been quick. You know, we're always balancing sort of rigor and process and getting the appropriate committees involved with sort of speed to decisions and communication. And you know, we understand that this has put some people in a challenging circumstance. Our priority again, it's safety, and we've had strong protocols. These are additional layers. The landscape's really changed daily with cities implementing new requirements literally overnight. The Arlen Specter U.S. Squash Center in Philadelphia, literally overnight, we had to change our policies. So unfortunately, the timing doesn't always work out well. We're trying to provide as much notice as possible, but we felt collectively across the committees and on our team that these were important enough changes to implement despite some potential negative impacts.
A question for you, Kim. For people who are waitlisted at JCT or a Gold event, will that waitlist be active all the way up to the last day, given that some players may drop due to a positive test? And what happens, if a player does test positive on the day of the tournament? So I think separating those two, I think it'd be good for you to cover if a 3-day test comes back negative, someone has a positive rapid test, what happens with that individual? And then the second question being how waitlists will be handled leading into that.
I'll take it. You want me to take the positive, Kim?
Yeah, you do the first bit, I'll do the second bit. How about that?
That's good. I'm not very good at managing waitlists. When I started in this role, we didn't really have waitlists. So if we have a positive test on site with the rapid test, it means we've successfully screened someone out who thought they didn't have COVID, or at least didn't a few days ago, and then does. So that's really the whole purpose. So we'll work with the family to coordinate handling the response, including communications with the appropriate authorities, facilitating accommodations as necessary, if a quarantine is required, et cetera. So that's effectively how we'll handle it on site.
Also, so that people know, if you do test positive with a rapid test on site, the recommendation is that you go and get a PCR test to verify that you indeed are positive. That would be your first move. And then once you get the result from that, then the next thing will happen, whatever that may be, whether it's quarantining or not. But the first thing you should do is get a PCR test to verify. In terms of the waitlisting, so the question is, if somebody tests positive on site, then it's too late to obviously take someone from the waitlist because you'll be at the day of the tournament. If somebody tests positive due to the 3-day COVID test, it will depend a little bit on timing and when that is, whether they give us a result on the first day of that 3-day period or whether it's on the 3rd day. There are places that you can get a PCR test quickly and a result quickly. So I think we would still try to reach out to people to see if they wanted to play and to see whether it was feasible for them to get that 3-day, to get that PCR test. We would still require the PCR test and we'd still require it to be negative. So there would be a conversation with the next person on the wait list to see if it was feasible for them.
Thanks, Kim. I'm going to keep the rapid fire questions going. Kevin, if you want to steal this one from Kim, you can. We had a question about enforcement of mask wearing at non-JCT events, Gold and below, and those that U.S. Squash staff are not directly running. Can you speak a little bit to both the enforcement as well as community responsibility there? The individual indicated, at some tournaments they saw masks often not being worn correctly when on court, and that places players that are wearing them correctly in an unfair situation in certain circumstances.
Sure. I hope I'm wrong. Sorry, Ken.
I can take it if you want.
No, it's okay. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think masks are going away anytime soon. Probably not for squash. Anytime anyone ever sends me a link about, hey, this mask might be really good for squash, I order 5 or 10 of them. So feel free to send me links. We play with them all the time. It's not fun. However, given the consequences, it's totally tolerable. In terms of behavior and enforcement and compliance, there's been an ebb and flow, I think, culturally in terms of how seriously people have taken COVID and the mitigating efforts. So I think to a degree that's understandable. At the same time, similar to the question before, to say, does every facility know that masks are recommended regardless of level and requirements, et cetera? We can do a better job of communicating that and frankly, bolstering the tournament directors' commitment to enforcing it. Look, kids are gonna let it hang over their chin from time to time. We're not seeking perfection. We're seeking the best possible outcomes at all times, but it's not gonna be perfect. I'm not endorsing wearing around your chin, certainly. And those who we work with at the local level, we need to be really clear that, you know, we need their support in making that happen. And my ask to all of you is really, you have, you know, for those of you who are kids on here, you know, wear your mask, and parents, you know, encourage your kids to wear your mask properly.
Right. I think there's a responsibility on the parents, the coaches, and everyone at a tournament to help each other to enforce some of these mandates as well. And I do understand some kids are not wearing them properly. The tournament directors are directed to do their best to make sure that they are. But again, I think if everybody can help, if you see your son or daughter with a mask not being worn properly, perhaps you can help them to do it correctly, or that you can ask the coaches to as well. So it's a community responsibility to try to help to make this happen. After all, we're doing it for safety. We're not. It's to try to reduce transmission. So it's a safety issue.
This is a good one for you. Question of whether the consolation draws will be filled in, indicating given the potential for surprises in different player levels coming out of the pandemic, and people have been able to play more or less or improved in different ways. Can you speak to whether we'll continue to have full consolation draws at events so kids have multiple chances depending on wins and losses throughout the event?
I'm not sure if I completely follow that. I think we're going back to the system we used to have, in that we will have a 32 draw saying we'll have a feeding consolation. We'll continue to have at least 3 matches guaranteed for players, try to do more where we can. So we still want to give people the same experience that they used to have in terms of number of matches, if that answers the question. I'm not sure if it does.
Yeah, I think it does. There was a follow-up as well on the wait lists, and I wanted to just clarify the response as well, that the wait lists, if players test positive in the lead up, we'll still continue with our standard wait list policy and attempt to be filling those draws with players on the wait list, with the one caveat that there will be those players who are coming off the wait list will also need to fulfill the testing requirements per all of the other participants within the event. So there may be circumstances where players who are first or second on the wait list or close to the top, makes a lot of sense for them to get a PCR 3 days ahead of the event, like others, with the anticipation that it's possible they could enter the draw. Is that an accurate summary, Kim?
Yes, very well put. Thank you.
For question on whether the process for us developing our kind of rules around COVID and safety policies, and kind of who has input into those decisions, and what information what information are we looking at, and individuals are we talking to, and whether legal counsel has weighed in on the mask issue for vaccinated individuals.
So as I mentioned, we have several committees coming at it from different angles, whether it be the teaching pros and coaches, junior parents, the medical advisory committee. Interesting mention that we've just had our first few calls with the youth and excellence in squash committee. So that's an opportunity for kids to share their thoughts directly with me. And interestingly enough, after a few sort of very soft comments and credits to the good job US Squash has done, I made it clear to the kids that constructive criticism is what's most helpful. and that changed the conversation pretty dramatically. So I think that will be a useful input as well, not specifically to COVID policies, but just in general, the junior squash experience. And so, yeah, we get lots of inputs. I can't remember the second half of that question, Dan.
Whether legal counsel weighs in on
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Kevin, I have another one for you on, if there is such a concern with safety in the Delta variant and what's going on, was there also discussion to potentially cancel the upcoming JCT because kids in different situations are affected either positively or adversely within their recruiting process, rankings and ratings and so on? And a follow-up, not directly to that, but whether there are concerns around kids feeling pressure at 15 and below to make some of these vaccine decisions, and whether that is going into the discussions with the medical advisory committee and within the staff.
So I'll take that one first. Certainly there were discussions around that. At the same time, it seems pretty clear. FDA approved to 12 and over, maximally effective against preventing illness and reducing the impact if you do get sick. So, that evidence is pretty clear. So it frankly hasn't been a long debate, especially given sort of where we are in this pandemic and the actions being taken sort of across the board. So the first part of that about whether or not we considered canceling this event, yeah, I mean this event has sort of been topic number one, oddly, for 6 weeks, and every day we're like, okay, where are we? What should we do? What's our plan B? What's our plan C? As I mentioned, every day we question, are we taking the right approach? And so yes, it was definitely considered, and I think. Look, people play for different reasons, and people are approaching the pandemic in different ways. And, we understand that some families feel pressure to compete at the national level as this return to play process proceeds. We don't like that. We don't like that people feel pressure. We do see it as our jobs to set up this structure for a variety of reasons, many of which I talked about earlier. In terms of recruiting and college recruiting, and I guess to follow on to that point, we're continuing to sort of look at that. I mean, there may be things that we can do to sort of mitigate, especially right at this time, people's sense of I have to compete in this because it's there. Maybe it's adding another JCT. Maybe it's presenting rankings by rating as well as by points in parallel. Probably something that also reinforces sort of the multiple pathways into and through the game. So we are actively discussing that because it's not a good thing that people feel that pressure. Families have also shared concerns related to the impact on safety and the Delta, and that's why we've updated these protocols. But on the recruiting side of things, I think an important follow-up that we can do is pull in some coaches and the executive director of the CSA. We have a really collaborative relationship with them, and I think we had David Pullman from the CSA at some JCTs previously. We can have a dedicated conversation again with him, a forum or two with coaches. So there's more understanding in terms of the recruiting process, the impact of COVID on it, what people should be sort of hand-wringing about and what they shouldn't. And I would say I've got a pretty good basis for this opinion that for those who are worried about where their kids are falling in the rankings at the national level, based on points and its impact on recruiting, shouldn't be. there isn't a coach that I talk to who says, yeah, that's what I look at in terms of my interest in recruiting a player. There's a whole body of work out there. There's videos. It's as much about potential as it is about current performance. And so there are a lot of factors that go into that. And I think that we can do a better job of working with the CSA to make sure people understand that this is a hard year for any age, and sort of as people are in that transition age and as the recruiting season is coming up, you know, there are probably things that we can do to alleviate people's anxiety around that and just make it a better process, because there are places for kids to play, and they're great schools with programs that are good fits for every kid, no doubt.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to take the opportunity to pause the Q&A specifically around COVID. I know it's obviously the central issue on people's minds. I do want to give Kim the opportunity before our 8 p.m. formal timing end to jump in and speak through some of the policy changes that have just come down the pipe and were announced a few weeks ago. So we'll do that now, and then we're happy to also take questions in the chat regarding any of those. And as Kevin indicated at the beginning, we are going to stick on after 8 p.m. For anyone who would like to stay and has additional questions, whether related to policy or to COVID. So with that, Kim, I'll pass it over to you and let you speak through some of the new enhancements that were just put through.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And my original intent with this call, I think, as Kevin said earlier, was to go through some of these changes and to get people's mindsets back into the system we had back in March 2020. It's been 18 months, about 18 months now since we had that system, and we've all kind of forgotten how that used to work. I know back in the office, there's Harry and myself, and we've got a couple of new people, and we're like, how do those points work again? How do we calculate the averages, the cut list, the seeding? And so we've all, I wanted to get people's heads back into that system, which is slightly different. I think you can all see now that the gold tournaments on the calendar for next year, they're all now ordered by cut list points. So we've got people now who are questioning whether what's that order? Why isn't it rating? Oh no, it's cut list points. Or what are my points? How do I calculate them? So this is what we're going back to. And there are a number of issues that we had. I think if you cast your mind back, we made the changes to the division sizes, and that caused a few issues which we tried to address for these policy changes, which we announced a few weeks ago. So from September, I'm planning to have the gold, silver, bronze with the limited draw sizes back to the 32 draw for the JCT, 16 for under 11s. The gold tournaments are 24 on the East Coast with some 32 division sizes and 16 outside of the East Coast. That recognizes the fact that there's not as much of a player base outside of the East Coast, yet we want to provide opportunity as well. The silver tournament, 16 players over 2 days, bronze tournaments, 8 players over 1 day. And then we have our point system, which provides some mobility between the layers. So we had a few issues that we wanted to address, and we would have addressed last year had we not had the pandemic. One of them was playing up, and people did report to us how it was kind of aggravating, particularly I think in the under 17, under 19 age groups, to have people playing up 2 age groups. And that would then effectively take potentially a place, an eligibility place away from them, so that they couldn't get into a gold tournament or a JCT in an important year for them, get those points to get their ranking. And the players who were playing in that age group were playing because they didn't want to affect their ranking in their younger age groups. So we thought about what behavior we really wanted. We wanted to make sure everyone was playing for points. Everybody cared about their results. And that made it a level playing field. But we also didn't want to stop people from developing either. So there are cases where you have a younger player who is very good and who deserves to be in that older age group, and they are working their way through the rankings and they're trying to be the best they can be. So the adjusted policy there was that, or is that, players really have to play in their own age group unless either they're within 11 months of aging up. So therefore they can strategize how they do age up. They can work out which division they want to play in and which points they want to receive. But also if somebody is a top ranked player, so a top 16 player in an age group, they should be allowed to play up to the next age group. And so they can work their way through the system. So we think that putting these two things in place should help to alleviate the issues that we had 2 years ago. The second policy change that we had was just looking a little bit at the entry timelines. There were two that were particularly troublesome to us. One was at the bronze level, at the beginner level. Those players tend to not be as familiar with the system as those who are in the higher levels. And so giving them more time to enter tournaments and to understand the timelines, we felt that that was necessary to make that an easier start into the system. So making those timelines closer to when the tournament starts also helps the tournament directors encourage their kids to start playing in these tournaments. And the other deadline that we're going to monitor is a late withdrawal deadline. I think many of you have contacted us about that too. On the Monday before the tournament starts, we have a whole swathe of people withdrawing, which is fine when there's a wait list, but those people who are on the wait list then have very limited time to plan to be able to get to that tournament. So there's a feeling that maybe we could bring that timeline a bit earlier to give those waitlisted players more time. The counter to that, though, is that if you do play in a tournament on the weekend and you get injured, then we want you to be able to withdraw without penalty. And so there's a balance there that we're still not sure where it should be. So we're going to continue to monitor that deadline, monitor the number of players that are withdrawing and the repeat offenders. And then we'll come back and talk to you more over the course of the season to decide how we address that in the future season. The US Junior Open, we do intend to play the US Junior Open this year. I think 2 years ago, we had limited the number of playing spots for US players. We had it at 75, ranked 75 and above, 48 players for the US players. But we feel that in this climate, there'll be fewer people traveling to the tournament. And we also felt it was a little bit too restrictive for our American players. And we wanted to open that up and allow more of them to have the opportunity to play. So we just adjusted the ranking eligibility to 150 and above and have at least 64 US players in the event, leaving another 64 players for international. So we'll see how that balance works this year, although this year could be a slightly different year. We'll see how things go. How the world is today will not be how the world is in December. So we'll keep monitoring that, and we'll obviously keep keeping you informed of how that event progresses. And finally, we wanted to acknowledge for team squash, we have high school nationals, which is, I think, a fantastic event. I think it's the biggest team event in the world. And I think it's one of the best events that we have. And now as we increase the number of locations around the country that play squash, places like Houston and the Bay Area that don't have those school teams who still want to have that team experience, we're just trying to work out how we can give that to them to allow them to eventually to develop a team to be able to go into high school nationals. So high school nationals, you have a team of players who come from the same school. When it's an emerging area, you may not have that many players who are at the same school, and so they wouldn't qualify. We now have two Scholastic team championships. We introduced interscholastics last year, 2 years ago, and so we intend to use that to allow the emerging areas to develop their school teams and develop their scholastic squash, and then hopefully they'll be able to grow it to a point where they can then send teams to the high school championships too. So really the interscholastics for your JV teams, for your second teams, and also for the hybrid teams to help them develop their team programming. Those are the main policy areas that we looked at, but also at the same time, I'd like to mention that as part of the COVID protocols, we've also restricting silver tournaments to players who reside in the state of the silver tournament or any contiguous state to try to reduce the travel burden on those tournaments. That'll allow players to travel by car, not necessarily by plane, and the bronze tournaments to keep it to within the state as well. So to try to kind of restrict those and regionalize those tournaments, which they kind of are anyway, but we wanted to put some protocol on that at this time. Those are the main areas of policy, and they're all on the website, but if you'd like to follow up with me at all, just let me know.
Thank you, Kim. That reaches kind of the end of our formal portion of the question and answer and of the forum, as we've kind of reached 8 o'clock Eastern time. We are going to stick on for another 30 minutes here and continue to ask questions as they've continued to come in, both on COVID policies and general policy changes. I did want to take the chance to thank Sue, Kevin, and Kim for joining us, providing a lot of information, and would like to thank all of you, if you are jumping off at this point, for spending the time to engage with us and work with us so closely on these really difficult issues. So we hope that all of you who are dropping have a great night. So I'm going to pivot back to question and answers, Kevin and Kim, as long as you're ready.
Absolutely.
Shoot then.
Okay. We've got a question about why we're currently not allowing people to opt in to non-masked tournaments if they want to, and whether that's a liability issue.
Well, non-masked events can occur. We don't recommend it. Private facilities or any facility that doesn't have an indoor mask policy can run those events. However, for our competitions, accredited competitions that are part of some sort of structure related to ratings and rankings and qualifications, et cetera, we believe it's our responsibility to prioritize the safety of the community. And so that's why. So we're not preventing people from playing squash or competing in squash without a mask. We're not recommending it, and our accredited terms require it, with some exceptions.
So this one for you as well, Kevin. Some clarification on an earlier answer for if U11 and U13s are allowed to wear masks despite not being vaccinated, why can't older kids do the same, especially with the timing of the new rule less than 2 weeks from its eventual enforcement? And the question asker indicated that believe that this could be disappointing, demotivating and demotivating for kids and their parents who put in a lot of effort, obviously, in their preparation for JCTs.
Well, I mean, for the reasons I stated before, where the U11s and U13s don't have a choice, and so where the families have had a choice, we think it's fair to put in that recommendation. Yes, it's late notice. However, there's kind of a whole backstory conversation around people getting, a first shot, but not the second. The J&J is also an option. So, we feel like this is if someone was already on track to get one shot, getting the second shouldn't be a problem for this event. So that's where things shake out on that.
Thanks, Kevin. There's a question on scheduling and locations, and I've got kind of two questions that are tied together, so I'll ask them both and pass them your way, Kevin. So with safety being the top priority, the question is why the September JCT is currently in California, which requires a higher percentage of players to fly than one that would be at the Specter Center, where most of the players would have the option to drive. And that individual indicated this is especially relevant if someone tests positive on the rapid and is stuck, in quotes, in California. And a separate question from that, but related, is with the ongoing rise of the Delta variant in certain geographies, why not host all the JCTs and nationals at the Specter Center where more variables can be controlled?
These are good questions. So in terms of scheduling, obviously the West Coast event was scheduled pre-COVID, and I'm sure those of you who live on the West Coast find some dark humor in these questions. Look, at the end of the day, we're a national organization. We believe it's important to provide opportunities to compete around the country for a variety of reasons. Those from the West Coast have because of the distribution of players and facilities, have a much higher burden to travel, sort of on average, and have continued to sort of throughout this pandemic. So the timing of this nationally is is challenging, and that's why we've implemented these protocols. Really, at the end of the day, it's the travel and bringing people together, and that's why we pulled these protocols together. So, we've been monitoring this for weeks, looking at the data and comparing potential host locations, including Philadelphia. You're looking at variances week to week, but you're not looking at massive variances location to location. And we felt we could easily sort of switch the location to a worse location unwittingly. So I mean, they're good questions. They're definitely questions we ask ourselves, but I think that the approach we've taken is appropriate, sort of when you factor everything in.
Kim, I'm going to pass the next question to you. A question about with fewer guarantees now about stage 3 tournaments and the return to play, and with a lot of JCT players not having played more than one tournament, to talk through the thinking on continuing to change the ranking system back to points-based, and just the philosophy of switching back to points-based at this time in general. There's also a corollary question tied in that came separately about whether we'll continue to promote ratings-based events, even though we're switching back into the point system in the fall.
Yeah, the first question regarding is it effectively the right time to go back to a point system or to introduce a points-based ranking is actually something that we are considering right now. We're having some discussions internally as to whether that is the right thing to do now, what the impact of delaying it might be, and to continue with a rating system. And there's some balances there as well. So a rating system is not perfect either. The system we have designed is based around points. It's designed around rewarding people for good play and for allowing players who are developing rapidly to show that through mobility through the levels. Rating system, it's not that, and we all know that based upon our experience of the last year. So there are some things that we need to consider the advantages of going to a point system. Yes, we'll go to it. Will it be accurate on the first day? No, it won't be accurate because as you say, there's only been 1 or 2 JCTs. And so there won't be a full load of information for us to have an exact ranking. It will be good enough for people to be able to qualify into the tournaments they need to qualify into for the ranking system to be more accurate as we go through the next few months. And so I would suspect that by nationals, in November, then it would be accurate through a point system. But really, yes, we are considering it. We're considering whether we should delay that. And we're just looking at the advantages and disadvantages. And if we were to make any adjustments, we would communicate those. If they're good things for us to consider. So what's the second part of that question, Dan?
Just surrounding the, whether we'll continue to promote ratings-based tournaments in the newer structure.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, we definitely will continue to promote rating-based tournaments. I think one of the things, like going back to one of the policy changes of playing up 2 divisions, if people are playing up 2 divisions because they want to have the competition, they want to practice, we're not providing them with that opportunity. The only opportunity we've ever had is a points-based system. And so the ratings-based tournaments can provide opportunities to compete without the intensity of a points-based ranking. People can practice, they can try things out. It doesn't matter whether you win or whether you lose. You're not being judged by ranking based upon your result. And so there's definitely a place for those ratings-based tournaments. And we're encouraging our tournament directors to put some on the calendar, and we'll encourage you to play in them so that you get more variety of match play as well. So look out for those, please.
Thanks, Kevin. Did you have something you wanted to add there?
I don't.
You were looking eager. Kevin, if I could pass one your way, the current FDA full approval of the Pfizer vaccine is for individuals 18 and older, or I believe it may be 16 and over. I apologize, I'm getting it wrong, but it doesn't cover the full down to age 12 at this point. Can you elaborate in thinking of still requiring vaccines within that group at 15 and below?
I mean, because the question's been asked, we can bring it up with our medical advisory committee and circle back to it and reconsider it. To me, it seems unlikely. Generally, the emergency to full FDA approval is simply a function of the process is set up to track results over the much longer term. Because there's such a high level of vaccination among kids already, it's unlikely, but certainly we'll bring it up.
Thank you. I have a policy question for you, Kim. For players that haven't played in 12 months, will they drop off the ranking list when we transition back to a points-based ranking? Can you speak to the transition points process, just to clarify?
No, they won't drop off when we go to a points-based ranking. I think if you remember, if you cast your mind back to Memorial Weekend, we allocated every ranked player at that time, anyone with a rating, some phantom points, and those points will still be on their profile. So everyone will have at least 4 tournaments with points on their profile when we return to the point system, and that will give them a ranking when we go into that system. Those tournaments will eventually drop off, but they definitely won't drop out. And the whole point of those phantom points was to give those people a start in the system. So they wouldn't start at 0, they'd start at a level where they could then prove where they should actually end up and give them a chance to show that.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, and I would encourage people definitely to review, all the transition documentation on the website as well. It's not exciting bedtime reading, but there is a lot of great information on there to kind of see how those kind of points interact and roll off and help people kind of during the transition over the coming half a year here. Kevin, one for you here. Follow on to some of what you were talking about earlier about if we hosted all the JCTs at Pennsylvania. The question asker indicated this would reduce pressure on parents and kids, since at this time that most would not have to fly, and prioritizing health and safety is necessary. There's also kind of the flip side of that question that someone asked around, even though the majority of players are still within driving range of Philadelphia, we have a large playing population who are not in the Midwest and the West Coast and the South and so on, and the plan for kind of continued distribution of events as well. So kind of two competing questions, but at the same time, I think there's a unified answer there about how we're thinking about geographic distribution.
Sure, all of these things are always a balance, and there's not a perfect answer. It would be a lot easier for the staff and the organization to host all the JCTs at the Specter Center. There's no doubt about it. At the same time, we have a broader mandate, and there are reasons to host these tournaments in broader locations. We need to be fair and balanced as a national organization. And I think how we're handling COVID, it's natural that the question around how do you balance the allocation of competitions in a fair way, and now we're adding in a fair and safe way. And so, while I certainly understand the point about, well, quote, more people are going to travel to the West, therefore it's less safe. I think you can only take that argument so far. Again, we would be fine with hosting them all at the Specter Center. That doesn't make it fair. And so, that's why we have to sort of balance these, these factors. I would sort of bridge into another comment, and if I haven't answered that specific one adequately, will you let me know, Den? But, I understand people are anxious. I understand people are frustrated. We're not perfect. We are trying to strike the balance between safety an opportunity for the broadest range of competitors within the community. Constructive criticism is very helpful. Threats aren't particularly helpful or motivating. We feel very sort of middle of the fairway on mask mandates, and people are welcome to go play in facilities that allow it without a mask, and can arrange whatever competitions they want. They can even use our system, Club Locker, to do so in an unaccredited way. So, we feel comfortable with where we're netting out on these policies overall. Look, we're a community. We need everyone's support in this, and appreciate it, as do the tournament directors and the teaching pros and the coaches.
Thanks, Kim. Just, we've had a couple questions that follow around draw sizes, whether we consider upping JCTs to larger draws like 48 during this transition period. And similarly, I think it'd be helpful if you could just elaborate so that everyone's clear on what is coming down the pipe with draw sizes as we transition into the fall, and not just JCTs, but in other level tournaments as well.
Yeah, just to clarify, so at the moment, until Labor Day, we have the increased division sizes. So the JCT on the West Coast has some divisions at 48, some at 32. There's a variety depending upon the number of ranked players. And the reason that we chose to do that during this transition period was to give opportunity to people. We didn't want to be cutting people as much as we could anyway from these tournaments. We wanted people to be able to have a chance to show where they should be in the rankings. And so by increasing the draw sizes, we felt that that was giving them opportunity. And we also gave a lot of tournaments for exactly the same reason. So there were, I think, 8 golds plus 2 regionals and these 2 JCTs, which is more than we would normally do. And it was precisely just because no one's played since March. No one really knows where everyone fits in the system. So let's give you an opportunity to show that, so that we can at least start with ratings that are representative of people's playing order, which can then translate into, hopefully, into points as we go into the point system. But going back into the point system, which requires mobility, it requires having a regulated number of tournaments. We need to regulate how big those divisions are, because if you cast your mind back to those town halls back 2 years ago, we were saying how people were playing gold tournaments as their first tournament. And we have this now. Like just the other day, someone said to me, oh, I'm playing in my first tournament, it's a gold. And that's such a red flag to me, because a gold tournament is a high level tournament and requires, it has an intensity to it, as you all know. And so we are intending to go back to those draw sizes of, for JCT is 32 for every division except for the under 11s, which is 16. Gold tournaments do have a variety of division sizes for those at the East Coast, from 24 to 32, depending upon the division. For outside of the East Coast, it's 16. Silver tournaments have draw sizes of 16 and bronze tournaments of 8. So we do want to go back to that. This allows people to play at a level, to do well at a level, to then be mobile and go up to the next level of play. And they've earned their right to get there. And they do well at a silver tournament, they earn their right into a gold tournament, etc. And so we do need to limit those draw sizes going forward for the point system to work as it's intended.
Thanks, Kevin. Kevin, Kim touched earlier on, and you did as well, on kind of community responsibility around masking and wearing them properly during events. Can you elaborate a little bit on whether individuals can stop matches if masks aren't being worn properly, or whether there's a mechanism for people to submit feedback if certain tournaments are not, if mask mandates are not being enforced effectively at certain tournaments compared to others?
Sure. So there is a report form that comes directly to us on the website, and we can make that clear where it is and follow up. Kim, maybe you have the exact location. So if there's some negative feedback around tournament directors, another method is sort of the post-event survey that people send in. So there's sort of two channels there, and certainly we encourage that feedback. In terms of stopping a match, I mean, we have protocols in place that are documented and should generally be known where if there are issues, families should not interfere, should not stop play, should reach out to the tournament officials for them to do their jobs and make a determination and handle the situation. So, you know, at the end of the day, again, we're a community. I think we're best if we all buy into the general principle that these steps are being taken for everyone's benefit. And if we can address it in that spirit, obviously that's the most helpful and what we want to try and encourage. We recognize it's a challenge. We're a diverse community. We're from all over the country. We're in all very different situations. So, you know, we believe one of the great strengths of the sport is that sense of community and camaraderie. And so, you know, we want to encourage that and sort of reveal our character in what is obviously a pretty stressful time.
Thanks, Kevin. I think that's a good transition into the next question. You know, someone had indicated in the chat to me that at the end of the day, mask wearing properly is it's a sportsmanship issue and a conduct issue for people to uphold. But more generally, we had a question saying, as U.S. squash transitions back to a points-based system, where there'll be emphasis or greater emphasis on mandating good sportsmanship for both players and spectators and parents. And I know there's a lot in that in what we're planning and what we hope. So can I ask you to address that?
Sure. Sportsmanship is very tightly connected, obviously, to the sport. I think when you peel back the layers in terms of why families are involved and why parents enjoy the fact that their kids are involved in squash, I think upon reflection, people recognize that it's about the experiences the kids have. It's about the friendships that they make. It's about the values that they practice day in and day out around integrity and fairness and honesty and respect and courtesy. And so we obviously fundamentally believe these are really closely connected to the sport. They're learned every day and practiced. Again, we're a diverse community. We, as an organization, need to continue to emphasize the value of these principles. We need to do an effective job of communicating our expectation. We need to have adequate reporting when our expectations aren't met and the community's expectations. And we need to make sure that there are consequences to inappropriate behavior, whether that be players on a repeated basis, parents, coaches, spectators, I suppose. So it's a community effort, there's no doubt. And I think we're working on programs as part of sort of, you know, our next phase as we come out of COVID, hopefully, and with the Specter Center complete, and we gain a little more stability to support the community in that, whether it's putting our arm around new players and making sure that they're equipped to do what they need to do from an officiating point of view, having parents support new parents as they're kind of onboarding into the sport. I think there are some simple things that we can do with a little bit of resources to make it a more community-based experience and a more pleasant experience. We think fundamentally we have all the raw materials. In general, I think sportsmanship was on the ebb as we headed into the pandemic. We had made a concerted effort to emphasize those values and encourage a community effort on that. And you know, we are, as we come back, going to be redoubling our efforts to ramp our communications, to hold people accountable, but also importantly to cite good examples of great sportsmanship, which is central to the sport. So short answer, yes, that'll be an emphasis. And if we can wrap wearing your mask properly into that, that would be great.
Kevin, I've got one more for you, which is surrounding kind of the process for, and we've had a couple questions related to this, surrounding the process for development of these policies and adjustment for them over time. Are there other ways that we get input from the squash community in general that inform our decision making beyond what we've discussed up till this point?
Well, sort of reading between the lines, I guess, and something I commented before, we understand that sometimes it can feel opaque, and that's unfortunate. I think we need to work on that. And I know Sue's committed to pushing the organization in that direction. And it's not done out of intent. We move quickly. We have a broad scope. We have to handle a lot. We do from time to time, at least on an annual basis, survey the junior community on major policy shifts. COVID has been on a fairly unique track. We had done some early surveying around COVID and people's appetites for things. Generally on topics like that, the results across parent community is pretty inconclusive because most people tend to view it from their individual circumstances, whereas when we go through a more committee-based process and aggregate it, it tends to be, we're finding the balanced solution that we believe is best for the entire community. It doesn't mean that it's going to make everybody happy. That I think, Dent, we're getting close to being at our 30-minute level. I know, Sue, I've been told you wanted to make some concluding remarks, which I think would definitely be welcome.
I didn't plan to, Kevin, but as I was listening to the set of questions and reflecting a bit over the last year and a half, and in particular this latest stint, I did want to thank everyone here. We who are invested in squash, it's a significant undertaking. There's a sacrifice that we all make to participate in different levels for the sport that it is today. It's more challenging given that we are not fully kind of what I would call a large sport with every region developed in which we can do things from a regional perspective that would reduce, the travel and cost. We are a community that really is comprised of what I would say scholar athletes, and for those that are traveling to compete, doing it at an elite level. And we all know, for those that have tried squash later in life, and maybe how difficult this sport is and what it requires. So I want to thank everyone. I know it's challenging to begin with, and especially now with the circumstances, even more so as an indoor sport with all of the things that we are doing. Our focus is and going forward even more is to really be a listening and learning organization. And we are not always going to get everything right. I mean, I think back about exactly a year and a half ago, the decision to suspend accredited tournaments, national tournaments. And I remember the conversation, like, it was hard to read the tea leaves then. And it was an absolutely robust conversation. The process was the right one. We ended up being somewhat lucky through that. You do make your own luck through the process, but in actually being the first on what then led to, we saw a number of other governing bodies and sports following suit. And we say this not I mean, I also recognize there are going to be times when things are moving quickly. We have to adapt and make the best decision possible that we may not be as fortunate to get those right. So I do want to state there's so much complexity to the system. Kim shared in a very short, this call was really focused on some policy changes, and we didn't have as much time to go into it, but I did want to highlight, the quick list that she went in was vetted in so many different ways, and it came about through a process of all of you submitting your input. There have been casualties along the way. I think some of the changes we're making, there were families and kids that were very disappointed because that didn't exist. And so we are, this is what happens with the process of improving. And I am very sorry for those families, our families included within that. I'm on the equal playing field with all of you when it comes to this. We are not always have the same view within our family or within myself in terms of where it is. But what I can say is that I know the team is so hardworking and are listening. And if you don't feel like you are being listened to, it is sometimes a bandwidth issue. It's sometimes other things. It does take time. The process of change takes time. And I just do want to say, keep on filling out reviews, post-tournament surveys. Every single one is read. I promise you it is. And I know that the balancing rigor and process in terms of speed of decision-making, there are casualties along the way. Certainly, this is a situation in which that happened. In addition, balancing what I call the integrity of the structure of the competitive structure with safety and with growth of the sport. This is going to increasingly be something that our governing body, you'll be hearing more from US Squash, but we do need to grow our sport, and these investments are being made in a way that we hope are balanced. It may not feel that way. We're doing our best. We want to get more input, and we look forward to that. The final thought I would make is, as I travel around, I know, there are concerns, and certainly I have them in terms of a few bad actors in terms of sportsmanship and other things. Returning back to the sport, it is difficult for kids to do the officiating or roughing, other things. The rules and regs have changed, so there's been fallout on that. But the one thing that has struck me is the overwhelming care and concern that this community have had for each other. Times have been tough, and I see families, adding another kid into their travel plans or helping out, and providing support in ways that are extraordinary. And I just want to thank everyone. I think we all feel very blessed to be a part of this community. I want to thank you all, and I hope we'll keep on communicating and raising the bar for how we navigate through this together. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. I think that's a great way to close. And I want to take the opportunity to thank one more time yourself, Kevin, and Kim for your insights and time tonight. And more importantly, also thank everyone that took 90 minutes out of their evening to stay. Almost the majority of people stayed to the end. So we appreciate all. We look forward to seeing you at events, and we appreciate your input throughout this process. Kim, I didn't get to ask my question about why I keep getting worse at squash over the last 18 months, but I'll send that to you independently, and we won't address it tonight. So
that'll be the easy one.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.